Hello and good evening if you're in the United Kingdom, or good afternoon if you're on the West. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Trenoweth, and I'm going to be talking about films tonight, particularly biopics. So those are films about real people, and I'm talking about the synastry between the actors who portrayed real people, and a bit about the transits, about what makes a film successful. And I got quite a few examples. So this title of this talk is Mirror, Mirror, Famous People and the Actors Who Portrayed Them. So I'm going to start off with some really old movies. Now the first movies, appeared in the 1920s, and then later on came the talkies. So at the very beginning of the film genre, we had a lot of biopics that had to do with biblical characters, where it would be impossible to get any sort of birth data from them. So there's a few good examples that appeared in the 1930s. So I'm starting with one of the very earliest, and this is the biopic of the spy, or alleged spy, Mata Hari. So this movie is about a woman, an exotic dancer, who became a double spy. And she was found out and she was sent to the firing squad. So it's a real life event. Mata Hari is an extremely interesting person. Her real name is Margarita Zelle, but she changed her name to Mata Hari, which means Eye of the Sun, after her first marriage when she was living in Indonesia. So in this beautifully staged and ably directed production, which is now on view at the Capitol, the alluring Greta Garbo delivers another brilliant portrayal, says the reviews. So this film had a huge impact on its audiences. Here we have a very attractive woman performing erotic dances. Now in the mid-1934, some of the movie was cut out, and this was because of the Hays Code, which meant that certain things couldn't be seen on screen. So if you watch Mata Hari now, you'll notice that it's been hugely edited in places, and it loses some of the real meat of the movie. But and nonetheless, it's quite an interesting, if convoluted, plot. So this is the real Mata Hari, as we would imagine her if we talk about Mata Hari. This is the image that we conjure up in our minds. This erotic dancer, this femme fatale who kind of lured men to their destinies and got them in trouble and was stealing their secrets and trading with the enemy forces. But this is the real Mata Hari. This is taken just before she was sent to her execution. She was about 42 years old. She was no longer dancing by this time, and she was pretty innocuous. She wasn't really somebody who was causing a whole lot of trouble. But maybe because she was not as powerful as the generals and all that thought she was, maybe they thought she was useless. It's kind of theorized that she was sent to the firing squad because she had secrets that they felt that she was threatening to tell. So this is her birth chart, and this is an AA rated birth chart, and you'll see, appropriately enough for a spy, she has Scorpio rising. And now she became an erotic dancer just before her Saturn return. Now, prior to this, she got married quite young. She got married at the age of 18 to a Dutch soldier, and they moved to Indonesia together, and they raised a small family. Now, the husband, according to reports, was quite abusive. He had a courtesan. There was a lot of things that went on in this marriage that we would find unacceptable in modern times. But Mata Hari tried to make the best of it. Margarita, as she was known back then. And once her marriage ended, she began to do her erotic dancing. So just before her Saturn return, quite late for a dancer, it has to be said. And I just want to point out, she was executed on the 15th of October, 1917, when Mars was at 19 degrees Leo. So this is a real life event, sort of the the whole entire plot of the movie pushes towards this event where she is executed. Now, you don't see her being executed on film, of course, but the whole entire plot centers around this idea that she is going to get caught and pay the ultimate price. So just keep in mind that Mars is at 19 degrees Leo when she was executed, because it becomes quite important when we look at other things going on with Greta Garbo and the release of the film. So this is her last performance. It's recorded as the 13th of March, 1915. So these are the transits that were going on. So she had Jupiter just passing over her Saturn and her moon. And from this point on, she just sort of left the stage, of course, but she was in a powerful position because she married well, in that she was secure financially, but she was having, she obviously had to keep her place in society. And because she was still very attractive, she was able to meet very powerful men. And she began, it is alleged, taking papers and swapping papers between the Germans and the Dutch and other countries. So she was, the Russians. So she was being very much underhanded. And the whole entire film focuses on her actions as a double agent. So, as I said, her execution took place when Mars was at 19 degrees Leo. Now, the woman who played her was Greta Garbo. At the time, she was somebody who was extremely popular. She was gorgeous. She had this air of mystique. Everybody really enjoyed seeing her on film. But as you can see, her natal Venus is at 19 degrees Leo, which is conjunct the execution of the Mars of the execution of Mata Hari herself. And a few other things that are going on here too. This is the release of Mata Hari. Now, the way I like to work in my case studies is I like to show the synastry between the actor and the real life person, but also I think the story of the film comes out when we look at the release date. Now, when we have release dates, we don't know exactly when to say that they're being released to the public. So I've used noon charts, unless it's a premiere, which are usually at 7 o'clock and the date is the time is recorded. So a couple things that I've noticed about this is when Mata Hari was released, transiting Venus was on Greta Garbo's Chiron. So Greta Garbo was very well known. As I said, she was a very attractive woman, but she was also somebody who became famous for wanting her privacy. And as she became older, she wanted to retire from the limelight. She had a few more years of active acting, but she eventually, within that decade, withdrew away from the public. Also, the transiting Jupiter, in the weeks just before the film was released, transiting Jupiter was passing over that very important 19 degrees Leo point, which is the Mars of the execution and Venus, the natal Venus of Greta Garbo. And we also have Neptune conjunct Mercury, which I think sort of speaks of the, maybe the secrecy or the confusion around what actually Mata Hari did. Was she innocent? Was she guilty? Was she the femme fatale that we remember her for? And looking at this case, it seems to me that she was attributed with being far more powerful than what she actually was. So I think that Neptune is quite indicative of a mystery or a confused message. And certainly in the movie, there were messages that were being lost or mistranslated or misplaced in some way, or in some cases purloined, stolen from the people that they belong to. So this is a good example of the early biopics. And as I said, from this point on, we get a lot of biopics that are interesting, but a little bit controversial, like They Died with the Boots On came out, a good few years later. So there were lots of other interesting biopics, but I find that the biopics become more interesting as we go further into more recent times. So I'm going to jump ahead. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say that I've written a book on this topic. It is called Mirror, Mirror. I have about 136 case studies. So I have quite a few, as I said, I have quite a few in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, but you can imagine what's going on in the 30s and 40s. We've got the war going on, not a lot of money, to make movies. So things get interesting to me by the time we get into the 1960s and 1970s. We had Lawrence of Arabia, for example, and a good few others. But I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to go to Silkwood, because Meryl is the most interesting actress I think that we're ever going to have. She's done no fewer than 10 biopics. And so in order, they are Silkwood, which I'm going to talk about in a second, Out of Africa, Heartburn, A Cry in the Dark about Lindsay Chamberlain, Music of the Heart, Adaption, Julie and Julia, which I'll talk about too, The Iron Lady about Margaret Thatcher, Florence Foster Jenkins, and The Post. So she's become well known for her ability to step in to somebody else's life. So she did Silkwood, and Silkwood was one of these movies when it came out, because nuclear power was something quite new and everyone was maybe a little bit worried about the effects of nuclear power. And it's quite a scary movie in that, this seems to focus on a working class family who work at the only job available, which is nuclear power plant. And they have these sort of contamination scenes, and they get plutonium soaked into their clothes, or it spills, and it comes out when they do urine tests, for example. And then whoever gets contaminated they call it cooked, which is a terrifying term, cooked. And they have to be put into a shower and scrubbed down to release, scrub the skin cells off and hope to get rid of some of this plutonium. So in the movie, Meryl Streep plays Karen Silkwood, who is a safety leader, and she becomes somebody who becomes quite well known in her lifetime for reporting, for being a whistleblower. So at the end of the movie, she's driving down a road, she's got the union papers next to her, and she's really going to cause a lot of problems. But she was rear-ended, it looks like, and then she was killed in this car accident. So of the movie, Meryl Streep said, I don't know what happened. And she's talking about Karen Silkwood's mysterious death. I went into the movie thinking that, of course, she was killed, but now it's more of a mystery than ever. She, Karen, was full of contradictions. She loved her children, and yet she left them. She was on about safety, yet she sometimes smoked dope and popped pills on the job. So Meryl saw her as this great contradiction. So Meryl Streep, as I said, is quite a fascinating actor. And what I think makes her so fascinating is that she has the planet Jupiter right on her descendant. So if you know anything about mythology, you know that Jupiter was the great shapeshifter. He could appear as a shower of gold to Danae. He could appear as, any number of different animals. He appeared as a cold little bird on his wife's, future wife Hera's windowsill. He was shivering, and then she took him to her bosom and he turned back into Zeus. So Jupiter is about taking advantage of every opportunity that we have and milking it for all it's worth. And in Meryl's case, her ability to master accents, because she has a very wide range of these accents that she's put to great use. In Silkwood, of course, she just played, a typical American who was thrust into this role of playing the heroine to so many different people who were at her nuclear power plant. So, and this is the real Karen Silkwood. She has an AA rated chart as well. She is Libra rising, you can see over here, and she has a sun early on in Pisces. But if we put them together, how they work together and what they're stepping into. So here we go. We have Meryl Streep with her Venus in Cancer stepping into Karen Silkwood's Saturn in Cancer. So Karen died on the 13th of November, 1974, when Saturn was at 18 Cancer. So it was at Karen Silkwood's Saturn return that she died. And then Meryl Streep, of course, is able to step into this and understand how Karen was able to leave her children with her ex-husband, how she was able to form her own strong family through the people that she worked with, her natural protectiveness of the people that she felt that she was obliged to protect and take care of. So this is a a quadrille, and I understand that these are quite difficult to manage. So I've tried to circle the most important parts. You may see other things that you want to comment about, but the one I want to point out is in the movie, it was plutonium poisoning that the workers were concerned about. So when the movie was released, we have transiting Pluto, which is conjunct the Mercury and the Uranus of Karen Silkwood's death. So we know that Karen was contaminated by plutonium, and that was her concern for her colleagues as well. And here we have transiting Pluto, which seems to be drawing out this story of this terrible tragedy. Now, the other movie that Meryl Streep did was Julia Child. And Julia Child was one of my favorite television shows when I was a little kid, and I was about 6 years old. I remember rushing home from school wanting to watch his cooking show. But Meryl Streep said on Julia Child, Julia, that spirit was very much like my mother's spirit. Joie de vivre, she had it, and a great sense of fun and an infectious ability to bring people along in whatever adventure she cared to take charge of. And certainly Julia was this person who had this wonderful sense of humor. She was adventurous. She worked as a spy, kind of like Mata Hari, although it wasn't a double spy. And she eventually met her husband, Paul Childs. She was abnormally tall. She was like a 6-footer, which she always felt put her at a disadvantage. So she was a bit late in getting married, late to the standards of the 1940s. Now, like Meryl Streep, she also has Jupiter on her descendant, Jupiter in its rulership. So I think that, you know, Julia was able to step in to television at the right time, and she was able to present the right information that people wanted to hear. Now, her feat was that she took all these translations from French recipes, and she converted them not only to English, but from the metric system to the imperial system as well, which was no mean feat. So it really would have taken quite a lot of Virgo energy to be that precise and to convert American cooks from, you know, TV dinners into cordon bleu cooking. So Julia Child, through her TV show, through her very famous and successful book, she was able to convince American cooks to be a little bit more adventurous. And her catchphrase was about using butter, the rich butter, and lots of red wine, and to make, when you go shopping, you choose the best ingredients. These are all habits, of course, she would have picked up when she lived in France with her new husband. And Meryl Streep, as I pointed out, she also has Jupiter on her descendant. So the two together, what I thought was interesting is that Meryl Streep has Mars and Mercury pretty close to Julia's Saturn. So what I felt what Meryl Streep was able to pull out of this was sort of the precision and the ability to be bilingual, because there was a bit of French and a bit of English. Julia Child could not speak French when she first arrived in Paris. She had to learn, and she had to learn how to read it as well, and she had to learn how to convert it. Also, if you look down here, Meryl Streep's Neptune is conjunct Moon in Libra, and also very close to the South Node. Now, what I found in my 130 plus case studies is that the nodes are often implicated between the character and the actor or actress who played them in the biopics. So I found that to be far more common than chance. So I think there is something. I'm not finished with all the data analysis that I need to do, but that's sort of the preliminary results that I'm coming up with. So here we go. This is the moment of sensual delight. This is quite a big moment in Julia's life. This was when she had just gotten married. Her and her husband were coming into Rouen to have a bit of lunch. Like I say, they'd just been married. They might have been on their honeymoon. I'm not entirely certain, but they came to this restaurant, and she describes this moment where they ordered a simple meal of mussels with browned butter. And she describes this moment when the lid came off the pan and she caught the smell of the mussels cooking along with all this beautiful butter. And she called it the moment of sensual delight. And in the movie, this is quite a pivotal point, because we see Julia, who was uncertain of what she should do with her life once she left the services. You know, what was she going to do with her life as a housewife? She had no clue. She also grew up in a household where they had their own cooks, so she didn't know her way around the kitchen at all. And by the way, neither did Meryl Streep. One of the things Meryl Streep said about her household was everything came from a box or a packet. When she was growing up, she didn't know that potatoes had to be peeled. She didn't know what they looked like. She thought that mashed potatoes came out of a box and you just added water to it. So she talks about going to her friend's house and seeing something that looked like oblong tennis balls being peeled. And she asked, you know, what are you guys doing? And they said, we're making mashed potatoes. And Meryl recalls, you know, being quite surprised that their potatoes didn't come out of a box. So if we look at the moment of sensual delight, which is the outside box, we see that here that there is quite a lineup of Uranus and Pluto. Now, no surprises, because Meryl Streep was born around the same year of Julia's experience with this moment of cooking. But we also look over here and we can see that this moment of sensual delight really quite nicely picks up Julia's Mercury and Venus in Virgo. And from this point on is when Julia wanted to bring these recipes home so she could replicate them. Eventually, she became a student of the Cordon Bleu School of Cooking. She faced a lot of difficulties because she was the only female in the class. She was quite competitive, and she always felt that she had something to prove to the men in her class. So from being the awkward, don't know really how to manage myself in the kitchen, she became a master chef. And she later formed her own school with a couple friends that eventually released this book and became a bestseller. So this is when the movie was released. So I spoke about Uranus and the sun all being lined up here with Pluto. But when the movie was released, transiting Pluto was opposite this point. So we can see that maybe Julia Child was kind of looked at as maybe a bit of comic relief because she was so tall and because she had this tremulous voice and she was so easy to imitate. Suddenly we see a different side of her in Julia and Julia. We see somebody who is to be respected for what she achieved. And I think that was quite a turning point for a lot of younger people when they get to see maybe, you know, a caricature that they saw when their parents were children, and suddenly they can see actually the great influence that Julia Child had on modern cooking. As I said, she converted us from TV dinners into more adventurous cooking and sort of bridging the gap between different cultures around the world, as far as cooking goes anyway. Okay, the next one I want to move on to is Monster. This was a story based on the last years of the serial killer Aileen Wuornos. It was played by Charlize Theron, who is obviously a very beautiful woman, but in this picture she wore a lot of thick, heavy makeup. She put on a lot of weight to play this character. And she's in this interview, she's talking about the moment when she realized that she could actually pull this character off. And so she said, I didn't think I could do it at first. The thing that ultimately convinced me was, and I get emotional thinking about it, I had never had somebody believe in me like this before. I was always the person who would go into audition after audition after audition and lay myself on broken glass and not get the part. And all of a sudden, this woman is sitting in front of me and she's like, you have to. You're the only person who can do this. So that's from a Marie Claire interview last summer. So the real Aileen Wuornos, I want to point out, we remember her as a criminal who was executed for murder. But I want to point out that Aileen Wuornos was once a sweet, young, innocent girl. And she had an extremely difficult upbringing. She was sexually abused, it is alleged, from a very young age. She was also selling herself for cigarettes and food from a very young age. There's been interviews with classmates that have knew her when she was a child. She has these planets in Jupiter and Pluto in Leo. And her life is sort of marked by having a lot of money or having nothing at all. Now, this is a noon chart, so we can't look too closely at the angles, but I just want to focus on for just a second looking at the cycles of Jupiter. So at around 3 years old, she would have had Jupiter in Sagittarius. And this is the time when she was separated from her brother. There was a lot of family issues going on. At the age of 6 was when allegedly there was a lot of sexual abuse going on. So Jupiter would have crossed over her, around over this side, over her son. By the time she was in her early teens, she was selling herself. Now, at the time of her Jupiter return, her second Jupiter return at around the age of 24, she had inherited quite a lot of money, and she was dating the boss of a yacht club. So she had emerged from this very poor environment and had actually found herself into an acceptable society. But because of her drinking and because of her drug taking and other things that were going on, she eventually crashed the car that she had bought with her inheritance, and her boyfriend kicked her out. So she was suddenly having to face starting all over again. But the point I want to make about Aileen Wuornos, we can speculate all we like. Are serial killers born or are they made? But when I see this picture of this sweet girl, I can't help but, think we need to be careful of our students. We need to look after them, look after the children in our neighborhoods, and ensure that they're safe from harm, because that certainly didn't happen for Aileen. And I would say that it had a huge effect on her life and the choices that she made. Now, the whole entire movie focuses on the year or so between when she was committing her crimes and when she was actually arrested. So according to sources, she was arrested on 9th of January 1991 near Orlando, Florida. And she had Saturn here, which is opposing her Uranus, her natal Uranus in Cancer. So I think that she, at this point, it's clear when you've watched the movie Monster, is that she wanted to settle down. She wanted to have a girlfriend. She wanted to have a stable life. She wanted to preserve this kind of living. So she was taking crazy risks. She was still working as a prostitute, but she was trying to support her young lover. And eventually she got caught out because she was killing people. And she tried to explain that she was raped, she was defending herself, but the prosecution wasn't having it, and she was eventually found guilty of her crimes. And as I said, she was executed. So this is the beautiful Charlize Theron. The amount of transformation she had to do. She eventually won Best Actress for this film, and well-deserved as well. So this is how it looks when you put in what Theron is doing. So she has her Saturn exactly opposite of the time when Wuornos was arrested. So there is, I think a connection. When an actor steps into the life of an actor, it's like they take on those transits as well that they're experiencing. So we know as astrologers that an opposition sort of forces some sort of decision. What are you going to do about the situation? Saturn's about being stuck. For Wuornos, what she did was she started having to become more and more aggressive to get what she needed to maintain the lifestyle that her young lover and herself were accustomed to and that they wanted to maintain. So Eileen's execution took place when Jupiter was at 13 degrees Leo. So what you can see is it's actually pretty much conjunct Theron's new moon conjunction in Leo. So nearly there. This movie really was made about a year after Wuornos was executed. And the whole entire story of Aileen Wuornos being a female who was executed, it sort of launched a lot of different sort of ways of telling her story. For example, there was an opera that was made about Aileen Wuornos. There was a number of different plays. There was poetry. There's all sorts of sympathy poured out for this woman who had to face lethal injection. Towards the end of her life, Wuornos seemed to become more and more unstable. Well, you know, I think that's to be expected for anybody who's facing execution, that they would become increasingly unstable as their time came. Also look at Neptune, opposite to the execution, and also the new moon of Charlize Theron. There is an air of mystery. Is Wuornos actually guilty of everything? Should we have the sympathy towards somebody who's committed these horrible crimes? So her story, Wuornos' story, has been inspirational in that, you know, we're having a look at how women are treated, I think, you know, through their interactions with men, their lack of power in earning. You know, we understand that women are paid far less than men. And I think, you know, these days we're starting to question these things. You know, why is this? But when the movie came out, these were only questions that were just starting to be raised with any sort of view to coming to some sort of resolution. These days we still need a lot more female politicians, but since the movie was released, we're starting to see a lot more female empowerment. We have a long way to go, but around this time we're starting to see a lot more influential women coming and stepping forward. The next one I have is Ali. This is Will Smith, who played the boxer. Will Smith said he was very scared to meet Ali. He didn't know quite what to make of him. But he said, when we think about the legacy of Muhammad Ali, what he did in the ring is not what we think about. For years, I worked to transform myself into the man who changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali and shook up the world. That's really what makes my job so beautiful as an actor, he said. For 4 or 5 months at a time, I get to wear people's lives. So I got to wear Muhammad Ali's greatness, and I got to study and feel and embody the soul of the man. From the foundations of Islam and the strength of his Muslim faith and his life to the beautiful wake that he always leaves in his magnificent path. So I love these words that he used. I mean, these are very eloquent, very powerful words that he used to describe Muhammad Ali. And when you watch him box, you know, Muhammad Ali, of course, himself said, "I float like a butterfly and sting like a bee." But when you actually watch his boxing, there is, you know, this beauty and grace that you don't see in boxers these days. It wasn't all just about, you know, beating somebody up. It was about, you know, having the skill to gracefully fight somebody else. But I really love what Will Smith said. He said, for 4 or 5 months at a time, I got to wear people's lives. And this is what I think is the beauty of biopics as well. And what fascinates me about an actor stepping into the life of a real life person. They get to wear that person's life. And through astrology, we can understand how this works or how it doesn't work, for example. Now, Ali, in my opinion, was a great film. I really enjoyed it, but it was basically panned and wasn't really received well. Will Smith had to go through one heck of a transformation because he's quite a tall, lanky actor. So he had to put on a lot of muscle. I can't remember how much he put on, 40, 50 pounds worth of muscle to transform himself. And he had to learn how to box as well. So when he took on this role, he really did put himself into the life of Cassius Clay. And the plot centers around Cassius Clay's transition to his new religion of Islam. I love this. I just had to add this in. Muhammad Ali said, I am the greatest. I said that even before I knew I was. You know, what empowering words. And he said that he always believed that he would be a champion. He had it in his head from the time that he was a 12-year-old boy who had his bicycle stolen. And he was so upset about this. He knew that by the time he stepped into the ring at his Jupiter return, that he would be a champion one day. And of course, he learned quickly. He was naturally graceful. He was winning championships by the time he was 18. So here is the great man's chart. I am the greatest. You know, it's difficult not to make a joke about Leo rising. And he also has the sun in Capricorn here in the sixth. You know, boxing is all about doing the same thing over and over again, having this sort of routine, because boxers, of course, have to eat the right foods. They're prime athletes, especially someone in the class that Cassius Clay was in. They have to do all the right training, do all the right things in order to get to what they want. And he had this discipline. He was able to do all the right things to help him become this champion that he would grow into. And of course, you know, there's things like that he used to say, you know, about how handsome he was and how ugly Joe Frazier was, and all these different little things that he would say to wind people up. He used to tease Wilt Chamberlain. He used to shout timber at him because, of course, Wilt Chamberlain is a really tall basketball player, and he was meant to fight him. So he would intimidate his opponents. This is part of the fight. So he changed his name, and just to remind you, the movie centers around his conversion to Islam. So he changed his name after a meeting with his mentor, his Muslim mentor. So Chiron, transiting Chiron, was conjunct his south node, which in turn was, it was opposite his Pluto conjunct his north node. So this seems to me to be, you know, a very powerful transformation. We're not just talking about a name change, we're actually talking about a different way of living, a conversion, if you will, a digging deep to figure out who you are. He would eventually go on to refuse to fight in Vietnam. He would say, you know, what has the yellow man done to me? I'm not going to fight. He disposed of a lot of his medals and heavyweight belts that he got as a protest for being put into jail for being a conscientious objector. So this is Will Smith and Muhammad Ali. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm just going through a few really short key points. The book has a bit more detail. I just wanted to get in there and point out a few obvious things. When I'm using the orbs, I like to keep fairly tight, but this is a good example of some really tight orbs going on here. So Will Smith, we have him as the AA chart, so we can look at his angles. So he has both Mercury and the moon conjunct Will Smith's midheaven. So here we have, you know, the sensitivity, this ability to communicate, and it's being expressed via the way Will Smith is acting and the way he's presenting the great man through this movie. So this shows a quadrille. As I said, these are a little bit confusing, but I just wanted to point out the important things. So the name change happened at 12 degrees Pisces, but also when the film was released, Mars was conjunct this. So we can see there's a Mars-Mars conjunction between the name change and the release of the film. So of course, this is a film about fighting. This is a film about being a champion. You know, to me, this sort of tells you the tale of this man's fight to for justice, to find himself, and to become a world-class champion in the boxing world. I, Tonya. I hope that you've seen this film. I thought this was fantastic. So it's Margot Robbie playing the title of I, Tonya. She received some awards. She didn't receive the Academy Award. That went to Allison Janney, who played her mother. So the reviews say the result is a portrait of a woman who is both coarse and confident while still being perpetually treated with disdain. Robbie says the last thing she wanted was to be exploitative, but that she also didn't want to shy away from showing Tonya as a victim of violence. When we think of Tonya Harding, I really do think that we remember Harding as being the one that clubbed Nancy Kerrigan in the knees before a competition, or got someone to do it for her. It was a huge controversy when it happened. Now, Tonya Harding is not your typical, like, little delicate skater. The movie has her as being quite uncouth, quite trailer park trash, and I don't know if that's how true that is. But in her skating, if you watch live performances of Tonya Harding, she has this really rough edge to her that, you know, when it must take a great deal of courage, you know, to launch yourself off the ice backwards and do this triple lux or whatever routine that she was doing. Now, Margot Robbie had to learn how to skate competently. So she said that she would wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and think to herself, oh, I am too banged up from yesterday to go back on the ice. But she kept going back on the ice. So some of the tricks tricks isn't a good word. Some of the sequences that were filmed of the skating showed Margot Robbie taking off on the execution of the move, but it superimposed her head on another skater. So it was a good use of CGI to show, to make it look as if Margot Robbie's doing all of these sequences. But I'm pretty impressed that Margot Robbie could do anything, you know, having not been a professional skater. So she is a good example of an actor who has gone that extra mile to learn a new skill. Other people that I can think of in biopics that have gone the extra mile are like Walk the Line with Joaquin Phoenix, who learned how to sing like Johnny Cash, or Reese Witherspoon, who learned how to sing like June Carter Cash. So there's a lot of different examples of actors who have gone that extra mile. And I think that Margot Robbie falls into that category. So here's the real Tonya Harding. So we have, it's a C-rated chart, but I think when we look at, you know, some of the aspects, I think it'll make a lot of sense. What struck me, first of all, in the movie, the mom, the Allison Janney character, the mom is so mean and abusive to her. You know, the mom said, you know, I don't raise children, I raise champions. But, you know, there was a scene where the mom threw a steak knife and hit her daughter in the shoulder with the steak knife. There were scenes where, you know, she was slapped by her mom, or the mom said really horrible things, or sort of goaded Tonya into doing things that she shouldn't have done. Tonya was an asthmatic, and she was smoking, and she was doing all sorts of things that, you know, most skaters don't do. And she had a boyfriend called Jeff Gahuli, who was ended up being quite a bad influence. So I'm going to take Tonya's photo off of this chart, just so you can have a look at what's going on. I haven't seen too many charts like this. You know, we have this moon conjunct Saturn opposing all these planets down here in Scorpio, Venus, Jupiter, and the Sun, all connected to this, and very little other action going on. So we have this, you know, this sort of seesaw kind of scenario going on, where we have the mother and the unhappiness around this relationship, opposite to the need to take control of her life and to be her own person and to find her own value. So although her mother claimed that she put all her money into Tonya's skating classes, you kind of have to wonder, when you see this chart, you know, what Tonya brought to the table as well. You know, Tonya worked extremely hard. She was obsessive. She did things that other skaters wouldn't do, up to and including having her rivals' kneecaps damaged, if you believe the story. So she was kind of forced to decide, you know, which path she was going to take, what she was going to do. And she ended up carving her own sort of niche in the skating world. So this is the synastry. This is just one point of contact between Tonya Harding and Margot Robbie. And I think Pluto kind of says it all. Tonya Harding is very petite, but she's a powerhouse, very muscular, whereas Margot Robbie is quite a lot taller. So it strikes me that what Margot Robbie has done with this role is she's kind of harnessed Tonya Harding's power, and she used it, transformed herself into this this very skillful skater, when in fact she really wasn't a skillful skater at all before she started. And then this is the attack on Nancy Kerrigan's, because the whole film hinges on this attack on Tonya Harding's rival. So if you don't remember, they were at practice, Tonya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan were at practice one day. They had a competition the next day, and somebody took a collapsible baton and hit Nancy Kerrigan in the knees with it. And then there's damaged her knees, so she couldn't go on to compete. And then Tonya Harding went on the next day and ended up winning all these awards. And then a few weeks later, it came out that she might have been involved in this incident. What happened was that someone had hired a hitman, and nobody knows who did what. But the movie doesn't really say, you know, if Tonya is guilty or not, or, you know, who's done what. There's no great confession to who did this terrible crime. But what you are left with is the impression that here is a young girl, Tonya Harding, who's been abused, not only by her mother, but by the system as well. She was stripped of all her medals, and she was banned from the Olympics and kicked out of the skating association, and all these consequences. And was she guilty or was she not? Well, she seemed to be guilty by association. So I, Tonya was released just as transiting Pluto was conjunct Tonya Harding's descendant. So who was at fault for this terrible crime? Well, the movie implies it was her husband. The descendant was responsible for this this terrible crime. And also, I think you get a sense of sort of behind the scenes of skating competitions, because when you see the girls come out at the Olympics or whatever, they all look so sweet and cute, like little dolls on ice. You don't really see the nastiness that goes on behind the scene. But in I, Tonya, you do get to see how horrible the girls are to each other, cutting each other's laces and all this sort of thing. You never would have guessed it looking at them on ice. Okay, the King's Speech. This was quite a well-known film too. It resulted in, just let me get my notes out, Best Picture, Best Actor, and Best Supporting Actor. So Best Actor for Colin Firth and Best Supporting Actor for Jeffrey Rush. And Colin Firth says, "This is the third time I've played someone with a stammer. It had an effect on my body. I had headaches. I had to learn how to stammer and then play somebody trying desperately not to. It put my left arm to sleep. It was very peculiar. I must have been locking something, pinching a nerve. It was a semi-paralysis that would last for 3 or 4 days. Derek Jacobi said to me, you could find it affecting your speech patterns for some time afterwards. When the job's over, don't worry, it will go away." So just try to think about what it would be like to have a stammer, pretend to have a stammer, and then try to pretend that you don't have that stammer, and you know how challenging that would be to your acting repertoire. So here's George VI of the UK. This is the current Queen's father. So in 1935, George's father died. Now, George VI was never meant to be king. His older brother was meant to be king, Edward. And in 1936, in front of his brother, Edward signed his abdication papers. Uranus was at 6 degrees Taurus, which is opposite George VI, Venus. Now, just as an aside, Uranus will be at 6 degrees Taurus in January. And this is as I said, the exact degree that it was when the abdication crisis took place. If you'd like to read more about the royal family and the abdication crisis, I have an article on my website now about Algol, and All Change in the House of Windsor is the title of the article. So this is obviously very stressful on somebody who had a stammer. He was, at the beginning of the movie, he had to give some announcement at a horse race, and you could barely understand what he was saying. So he had to overcome this somehow. And of course, when you got a stammer and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have this terrible stammer, it just makes it worse, because you're getting yourself all caught up in trying to stop yourself from stuttering. And it takes a lot of training to get yourself out of that. So what Lionel Logue did, who was hired by George's wife, was to put headphones on, and then to have music, classical music playing, and then George VI would read a speech, a Shakespearean speech. And so he didn't think that this was working, but Lionel Logue gave him the recording, which shows George VI saying the speech absolutely perfectly with very little stutter. So from this point on, they knew that George VI could be trained or could be taught how to speak without this stammer. So the big speech that they're talking about will take place in 1939 on Christmas Day. I'm not exactly sure the time. I use 3 o'clock because that's when the Queen's speech takes place on Christmas Day in modern times. So I use that time. So, you know, interesting things going on. We have the South Node on George's descendant. And we also have picking up Chiron, of course. So this was a big deal to him. This was his moment where he could provide the leadership that was needed to go into the war that was raging at the time and prepare the British people for the difficult times ahead. He had to come across as somebody who was bold and brave, and somebody who was not going to be intimidated. So just imagine how different this speech would have been if George had delivered it with his stammer. He would have come across looking cowardly or incompetent. So it was really important that he get this right. And I have to say, historically, the books say that he nailed it. So Colin Firth, who played George, so what is he stepping into? He has his natal Pluto conjunct the King's South Node in Virgo. So just think about what Colin said. Colin said, you know, it's difficult to play somebody who has a stammer, who's trying to get rid of the stammer. And also look what's going on over here. His Neptune, that's first Neptune, is conjunct George's Venus. So, you know, what we have here is somebody who sort of understands intuitively what needs to be done, the relationships that he would have with the public at large, and how important it was to nail this, to bring comfort and hope for the people who were in this terrible sort of hanging on for the war. So the King's North Node is on Lionel Logue, the speech therapist. His North Node is exactly conjunct Lionel Logue's sun. And then we have Geoffrey Rush's natal Jupiter conjunct Lionel Logue's Saturn. And then we have over here too, we have Geoffrey Rush's natal sun conjunct Logue's South Node. So this is a really good example of how the nodes are implicated when you're stepping into something. So Geoffrey Rush was the actor who played the speech therapist. So I think this pretty much shows, you know, a bit of the skill that's involved in coaching somebody to come out of, I'm going to call it a bad habit, but I don't mean like, it's like cultivated bad habit. I just mean it takes a lot to train somebody to stop stammering. And then first Pluto is conjunct Geoffrey Rush's, Lionel Logue's moon in Virgo, which shows how they're all working together on this. And then the King's speech was released when Venus had just crossed over King George's ascendant, and Mars was there as well, picking up the speech's North Node as well as the King's Chiron. But I really think this is a film about a speech. And we have Mercury here, as I pointed out, we have North Node conjunctions, Pluto connections. So to me, Mercury is the planet that tells the story of the King's speech. And here they are, they both won Oscars. And the last example I have, this is my favorite film of the whole entire year. And I can't tell you how upset I am that Rocketman didn't come out better than it did at the Oscars. I really thought that Taron Egerton was so cute and so adorable, and I really wanted him to win. Another good example of an actor who goes above and beyond the call of duty. He sings all of Elton's old songs, and he sings them very, very well. So Taron Egerton says of his role, "I was very moved. I found it an overwhelming experience. I really felt like I was able to stretch myself and frankly reveal something of myself, reveal something of who I feel I am through the prism of Elton." So this movie opens up with Elton in a double suit. He's dressed as a demon. He's got horns. He's got the big demon wings. He's all dressed in red, and he walks off of a concert stage to Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And as he comes into rehab, he starts to lose little bits of sequins, little feathers, and as he sits down to talk to his therapy group, he loses a little bit of his costume. And at the end, by the end of the film, he's removed the horns and the hoods and the wings and everything else, and he's just ordinary Elton. In just plain glasses and in ordinary clothes. So the movie is about Elton's transformation from drug addict, drunk, and bulimic into somebody who found sobriety and found love again. So what does it take? So this is Elton's chart. It's marked an A here, but I'm not quite sure if it has an A rating in terms of the RADA rating. But anyway, we can use this. I think the most important aspect of Elton's chart is it shows the shopping addiction. So we have Jupiter in Scorpio, square Venus in Aquarius. So I think that's pretty much a hallmark of Elton's personality, that addiction, that greediness for the hedonistic lifestyle. He also has Saturn in Leo. I use Elton in my an example in Growing Pains, and I talked about how people who have Saturn in Leo are often very, very self-conscious of their hair and how they look to other people. They have like this perpetual stage fright, and they don't really want to go on stage because they don't really feel adequate enough. There's something that's frightening to them about having everyone look at them. However, in Elton's case, and in any case involving Saturn, you learn how to develop your Saturn and you learn how to work with it. Because we all know as astrologers that what Saturn likes the most is to be put to good use. So the more we practice our Saturn, the better we get at it, which was exactly the case with Elton John. He was the top, one of the top performers of the 70s and 80s. He was certainly one of the most wealthy performers as well. So he learned how to work his Saturn. Here's Taron Egerton. Now, I don't have Taron Egerton's time of birth, unfortunately, but I'm thinking, that they have the sun-moon conjunction. Either way you go with Taron Egerton, because the moon moves about 13 degrees per day. So even if he was born shortly after midnight, he'd still have the moon at 2 degrees Aries, or he'd have, it'd still be in Aries if it was 7 degrees later, if he was born closer to midnight. But I think they have this beautiful sun-moon conjunction, which shows a great understanding between the two of them. They kind of are able to tap into each other's emotions. Elton John said to Taron Egerton, "I don't want you to be a perfect me. I want you to do an interpretation of me," and which Taron Egerton, took as a great compliment. He was allowed to interpret Elton the way that he felt that he should be portrayed. So Taron was born around the time that Elton went into rehab in 1990. So the transits, the outer transits to Elton's natal planets are pretty close to what was going on. So here we have transiting Mars conjunct Chiron. The whole entire film was about Elton's journey into sobriety. And I think that Taron, with these transits, was able to tap into that kind of understanding. And when the movie was released, Chiron was exactly conjunct Elton's sun. And as I said, there's this real beauty in the way that Elton made himself transparent. It was like he wanted to get something off his chest, and he wanted to tell the world, it's possible to be sober. It's possible to turn your life around. And, Egerton was that vehicle, that the moon, that allowed us to get this glimpse into Elton's private life and into that transition process. So I love biopics, and what I find fascinating about them too, and maybe this is something that you would like to do as homework. If you have a particular actor or actress or movie that you like, have a look at your chart compared to theirs. And often what you're going to get is you're going to get like connections to your own natal chart. For example, I said how much I admire Taron Egerton. Well, Taron Egerton's Chiron is on my Jupiter. Elton John's North Node is on my ascendant. Julia Child had the same ascendant as me. So there's little, and I love, she's one of my favorite people from TV when I was a kid. So if you look at, the comparison and put yourself into, how you would perceive that actor or that real life person, you get a better picture of your own self. It's kind of like looking into a mirror, and you get to know yourself a little bit better and understand, how you operate as a human being. And the more practice you get, the more fluent you get with this particular skill. By the way, I think that looking at the charts of celebrities allows us to look at transits, so we learn how different transits manifest in people's lives. So, for example, I look on Wikipedia because that is a public domain. And from there we can see the transits, and we compare these transits to the actual key events in a person's life. And therefore we can understand how transits work a little bit better. It's not the same thing as saying that a celebrity is your client, because that's not how we work with clients. We hopefully nobody will take a celebrity's inner secrets and expose them just because they can use astrology. But working with the real life facts, we can start building like a case study of how these transits manifest in our lives and in other people's lives, and therefore we can come to an understanding of how these things work. Okay, I think I've gone over a little bit, but that's okay, because I'm just about finished. My name is Alex Trenoweth. My book is Growing Pains. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. In recent years, I've been working towards bringing astrology to education. These days, like everybody else, I'm working from home. If you want to come to my website to see some articles, www.alextrenoweth.co.uk, I'll be doing a course for Catholic College on adolescence. And I've just become the CAP ESAR president, which means I'm in charge of ESAR's course. And so we're working on making that a really powerful qualification, and we are looking forward to building on it. I do a lot of work for Cosmic Intelligence Agency as well, and obviously evolutionary astrology too. So thank you very much for having me. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it gives you some things to work on. Do we have any questions?
More a compliment than a question.
Hey, hi, Rob.
Hi, very well done. Enjoyed it a lot. I was actually in the movie Ali just as an extra, and I thought Will Smith was spectacular as Ali. I couldn't believe it. It was like seeing Ali. It was amazing, and I don't think he got the acclaim that he deserved for it.
No, I don't think so either. The critics didn't like Ali. And I totally agree with you. I don't think that he got the credit that he deserved.
And that's too bad, because I saw a great man in Will Smith portraying Muhammad Ali.
Sorry, say that again, Rob?
I was just doing my Howard Cosell impression. I thought Ali was great. I thought Will Smith was great as Ali.
I used to like Howard Cosell as a kid too. I remember what
Howard Cosell, down goes Frasier, down goes Frasier, down goes Frasier. Well done, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ra. And I see lots of other people here. Hello, Trudy, and thank you very much for joining us. If there's no more questions.
Alex, thank you so much. This is probably one of the most fascinating presentations I've ever seen. I just love
Thank you.
Honestly, I just love how you brought everything together, and I love how Saturn plays into it, Neptune plays into it, and Chiron. All it's like a healing journey, and bringing it all to life, and grounding it all in. It's thank you so much. Awesome.
It's a resolution, isn't it? That's what I find. It's cathartic, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Even posthumously, it's cathartic. Like I've really felt that strongly with Mata Hari, that she was always kind of portrayed as this evil woman, and then through the movie we get a little bit of sympathy for her and a little bit of a bit more understanding. But just gonna quick flash the book.
Absolutely.
It's still a manuscript. Mirror. It's coming out soon, with a few months. We're in editing stages, but yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. Ooh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This was awesome.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Okay, Alex, that brings us to the end of your meeting. Thank you so much. It was absolutely fascinating. Could you all please unmute and thank Alex Trenoweth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.